Alright, grade 7s, welcome to today's lesson. So in today's lesson, we're going to be getting our first major assignment for Tinkercad. But before that, I just want to take some time just to recap all of the skills that we've learned up until this point, just that I can remind you in case you've forgotten any of them. So the first thing that we can do is we can bring an object into our screen. Let me zoom nice and close and bring an object right into the middle of my screen. And see, I can just click and drag this object and here it appears in the middle of my work plane surface. Now, some things that I can do is I can use these black and white squares at the bottom here to change its scale. I can make it wider, or I can make it taller if I want. I can do anything that I want with this object in terms of changing its dimensions. I can also rotate the object on any axis of symmetry. I can rotate it like so, or I could also rotate it on this axis, or I could rotate it on this axis. Really, I could rotate it any way that I need to, or that it can rotate. And if I want to get some more accuracy, I can hold shift to rotate and snap it to 45-degree rotations. I can also change this object's color by clicking on the shape menu over here, or in the shapes, the shape menu over here. I can change its color. I can make it blue, or I can make it green if I want. I can make it any color that I choose. And down over here on these sliders on the shape menu, I can also change the properties of the shape by changing its radius to make it slightly more rounded, or I can change the steps to make it more jagged. I can decrease the steps to make it more jagged and ruby shaped, or I can increase them to make it smoother and more rounded. I can also, of course, increase its length, and I can increase its width from here. Just be careful changing these lengths and widths, because sometimes I've noticed that with Tinkercad, for some reason, it doesn't seem to give the same information. Sometimes it does, but you see here I've put in 30 for the length, and now it's made the length 73, which is a bit annoying. So just be aware of that. And then of course we can also change the heights using these sliders over here. But really what I'm showing you here is this radius, this fact that we can bevel these edges, as we say. We can make the edges more rounded by giving them a bevel. And we can really make almost any shape that we want to by doing that, as long as we combine enough shapes together. So we've also learned about a couple of other skills, right? We've learned about once things are in the right place, and we, let's say we're making a jewel, okay? And what I'll do is I'll just shrink this down a bit by holding shift to scale it, and then let me bring in a ring, and I'm just going to find the right axis of rotation, and I'm just going to rotate that 90 degrees. Now I've got a ring, and what I'm also going to do, so I'm just going to raise that up a little bit so that it's, you see, this is what I'm talking about, raising and lowering objects. I'm just going to raise it so that it's just over here on the ground. And then I'll bring this big jewel, maybe I'll make this a little bit smaller. I'll bring this more or less into place. And then once it's in the right place, and I've seen it from a couple of sides, remember you can use your arrow keys to just move it over a little bit if you need to, if you want to get some fine movement in there. And then once it's more or less, you can just raise it up into place. And there we go, it's in the right position. So that's how we can bring things into place and raise them up, that technique. But another thing that we learned is how we can cut a hole in an object. So let me see if I can find a shape. Maybe I'll cut a heart through this ring. So I'll make this nice and small. Let me just zoom in a little bit, and then I'll raise maybe a little bit smaller, just a little bit smaller. There we go. I think that's okay. And I'll move it a little bit over, and what I'm going to do, just watch this, I'm going to move this up all the way through and then just move it a little bit. And don't worry if it's not perfectly symmetrical. I think this shape isn't perfectly symmetrical. I think if I bring it a little bit, there we go. I think that's looking much better. So now what I can do is I can just raise this object up a little bit, and if I want to, I can make that, it doesn't need to be that tall. But what I can do is I can turn this object into a hole shape by selecting the hole over here, and then it turns it into a hole. And if you remember, I just select the two objects that I wanted to cut through, and then I group them together, and it cuts the object straight all the way through. And of course I didn't select the ring, so it didn't cut through the ring, but you can see how it cut through the jewel on the top of the ring, which is looking nice. So that's how we can use the hole shape to cut things. Remember, we can make really any cut if we wanted to. We could bring this in over here even if we wanted, and we could just move this somewhat into place. And then, you know, if for some reason we wanted to do this, or remember, I'm going against my own rules here. There we go. You see, I could do that and then turn this into a hole if I wanted to, you know, cut this much out of the ring. I could do that if I wanted to, but I'm not going to. So if you ever make an object and you want to delete it, you can either hit the delete key on the keyboard, but another thing that you can do is select this trash icon over here, which deletes it. And then, of course, if you want to undo something that you just did while we're here on this menu, you know that you can just select this undo arrow to undo the last action, and then select the redo arrow to redo the last action. So that's looking great. So you also know how to use the group feature to group some objects together. So I'm not going to do that here, because if I do, you'll see what happens. If I group these two objects together, you see how it does join them together into one object, which is great because then they both move together. But you see it changes the color of them. So I'm just going to go back to ungroup them because I want them to be separate in different colors. Just remember that if you want things to be together and you're okay with them being the same color, like if you're making a shoe, for example, then you can group them together and that will work. Then we also remember how we can select two objects, as I showed you just now, by clicking and dragging over both of them and then selecting them, and then I can move the object around as if it was a grouped object, but it's actually I've just selected both of them. And then another thing that I can do is if I have these objects selected, I can click the duplicate icon over here. And then of course, when I duplicate an icon, if I try and move it, like I'll just hold right to move it out the way here, and then maybe forward a bit to just move it forward a bit. You see how I can duplicate these rings, and I can make really as many rings as I want just by clicking duplicate. And of course, I don't have to move around with the arrow keys. I can just move them around like so and just make really as many copies as I want. So that's using duplicate. And then as I showed you earlier, we can, you know, if we select these things, we can use the arrow keys to move them around just in small increments and bit by bit so that we can get them more or less into place. Maybe we want to link these rings together, like some Olympic rings for some or other reason. So that's that. Then some things that you might not be aware of, which I'm just going to touch on again just in case, because I think it is the first time that we're doing these. You can actually mirror objects in any direction that you want. So I'm just going to use Control Shift and just click and drag myself over here so I can get a good look at this ring over here. And watch this. This is a feature I haven't shown you before. If I select these two objects and I select this mirror feature over here, I just click M on the keyboard, you'll see that it will come up with some options for some arrows, and however I click those arrows will be how it will mirror the object. So this might not be a great object, but you can see that if I show it like this and I click this one, it mirrors the object so that it's upside down. And I'll show you again, I can mirror the object again so that it's the right way up. But let me show you actually, oh no, wrong one. Mirror the object so that it's this one. There we go. So now it's the right way up. But let me show you maybe with the hemisphere over here. I'll show you what I mean. I'll just raise it above the ground just a little bit. So you see if I mirror it, you see oh no, this also isn't a great one. Okay, that was also a terrible example. Maybe what I'll do is I'll bring in one of, a star. A star will probably do fine, and I'll make it a little tall. So watch how I can mirror it. You see I can mirror it this way, and then it flips it on this way, and then I can mirror it this way. Maybe what I can do is I can do a rotation like this. There we go. So now you'll be able to see a good mirroring. So you see now I can mirror it this way to flip it that way. So it's like kind of like it's looking in a mirror. And then I can move it this way. I can move it this way. I can, I can really mirror it however I want. And I'll show you a great application for that in the second part of this week's videos. But that's how you can mirror objects, and that can be really useful. And we'll look at some examples of that. And then lastly, the last thing that I just want to remind you of is that if you ever want to undo anything again, just remember that you can just click these undo icons and just keep undoing to undo as much as you've done until you're all the way back to where you were and where you started. And there we go. That is the basic recap of everything that we can do so far in Tinkercad. Now, let's take a look at our first assignment for term 1, building a robot in Tinkercad.